Hello, I'm continuing my reviews on the Prophecy series with The Prophecy 3, The Ascent. Now, this is the third film in the Prophecy series, and the film was directed by Patrick Lester, who also directed Dracula 2000, he co-wrote Terminator Genisys, and he worked as an editor on several of Wes Craven's movies, like Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Scream. Now, I'm a huge fan of the first Prophecy movie. It's one of my favorite religious thrillers, it's one of my favorite fantasy films, one of my favorite horror films, one of my favorite action films, whichever you want to call it. Prophecy 2 is not as good as the first one by any means. Now, if you see my review on Prophecy 2, I think I was a little harder on that movie than it really deserved. It's not a great movie, but it's also not a bad movie either. For me, it's just kind of a mediocre film. I actually really dug The Prophecy 3. Now, it's nowhere near as good as the first movie, and it's no masterpiece by any means, but I think of the Prophecy sequels, this is easily the best of the sequels, at least in my opinion. Now, the movie certainly does have its problems, namely a timeline discrepancy, because technically this movie should be taking place in the future, because there's a character who was born at the end of the previous film who's a young man in this movie, yet you get cameo appearances in this film from characters from the first two movies, and they don't seem that much older than they did in the first two films. Now, there is something that might explain the timeline discrepancy, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Overall, I still really enjoyed this one. Not as much as the first one, but certainly better than the second one. Now, to quickly recap what happened in Prophecy 2, in Prophecy 2, the angel Gabriel, who has turned against God, he was going after this woman named Valerie, who was pregnant with a Nephilim, which is a cross between a human and an angel, and this Nephilim was the only thing that could end the war in heaven. Prophecy 2 ended where the Archangel Michael turned Gabriel into a human, basically punished him by making him what he hates the most. And then Valerie gave birth to her son, who she named Daniel, after his father, who was an angel. So, in Prophecy 3, Daniel is now a young man, and you find out that between the events of Prophecy 2 and this one, Valerie was murdered. Now, Daniel is sort of a street preacher who's preaching that God exists, but he's completely apathetic to humankind. And Gabriel has been living life on Earth as a human. In the beginning of the film, during one of Daniel's sermons, he ends up getting assassinated by this guy who is actually working for the angels. Daniel ends up coming back to life in a morgue, and this is where he realizes that he is not a normal human being. He is a Nephilim. Now an angel named Zalfiel, I'm not sure if I'm saying that angel's name right, is going after Daniel. And in the film, Daniel's girlfriend is trying to help him, but so is Gabriel, who is seeking redemption for the horrible things that he's done. But it turns out that the new leader of the evil angels is an angel named Pyriel, who is way worse than Gabriel ever was, and is potentially even worse than Lucifer himself, and Pyriel is trying to become the next god so he could rule the universe. And Daniel's the only one who can stop Pyriel. In the film, Christopher Walken reprises his role as Gabriel, who is now a human. Now, I said in my review of Prophecy 2 that it really seemed like he didn't even want to be there. Here, he actually seems to be having a lot of fun. Maybe that's because in this movie you see a whole new side to Gabriel, so Walken is actually able to explore this character a little bit more. And Gabriel is actually a good guy this time around. I thought that was really interesting. You don't normally see that in a series, especially not a horror series, where a character who was a villain in the previous films all of a sudden becomes the hero or starts helping the hero. It's like if all of a sudden Freddy Krueger decided, "I have changed my ways, bitch." But it works for this series because of the religious themes in this series. Like, it really becomes sort of a redemption story for Gabriel. My only criticism of it is I do think there should have been more scenes where you could tell that Gabriel feels tremendous guilt over the things he's done in the past. Like, maybe they should have had something where Gabriel is haunted by the ghost of the people he's killed in the past, and maybe they'll say something to him like, you're not worthy of redemption, and have the movie really be about Gabriel having to prove himself to the people he's hurt and to God that he is worthy, and maybe that would have made his redemption at the end a little more powerful. Like, on a storytelling level, what really should have happened is he should have joined Daniel in the fight against Pyriel. But I still liked what they did with the character in this movie, where you see Gabriel finally starting to understand humanity and understand what it's like to be human and why God loves humans so much. You also have Dave Buzzotta, I have no idea if I'm saying his name right, as the character of Daniel. You have Kayren Butler as Maggie, Daniel's girlfriend. You have Vincent Spano as the angel Zophiel. Again, I have no idea if I'm saying this angel's name right, but he basically becomes the main villain of the film, at least until Pyriel is introduced. You also have Brad Dourif, who most people might recognize as the voice of Chucky from the Child's Play movies, or Billy Bibbit from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He plays this religious zealot who becomes an assassin for the evil angels. You also have Scott Cleverdon as the angel Pyriel, and I will say one criticism I would have of this movie is Pyriel is a very two-dimensional bad guy. Actually, I should say one-dimensional, really, and the final battle with him is actually pretty anticlimactic. One thing I thought was interesting, though, is I think they were trying to imply that the evil colonel whose spirit took possession of the character of Mary in the first movie, I think they were trying to imply that he was actually a reincarnation of Pyriel, and that's why Gabriel and the other evil angels needed his soul in the first Prophecy movie. And you do have a cameo appearance from the character of Mary from the first movie, played by the same actress. Obviously, she was much older when they shot this movie. You also have a cameo appearance from the waitress from the first movie, and her scene's actually pretty funny. You also have the character of Joseph, the coroner doctor from the first two movies, show up in this film, and they actually give him a lot to do in this movie, which I really liked. But therein lies a problem with the movie. Joseph, the waitress, and Mary really don't look that much older than they did in the first film. I mean, Mary does, obviously, because she was only a little girl in the first movie, and I think the actress was a teenager when they shot this film, but realistically, the character should be a lot older because the only way the movie makes sense is if it's taken place in the future. Because Daniel was born at the end of the previous film, and he's a young man in this movie, so realistically this would have to be like a good maybe 19 years in the future. Now, there is something that could explain that. Because Daniel is a Nephilim, perhaps his growth rate is accelerated. I still think it's taken place in the future, but maybe Daniel's actually 9, but he looks 19. Once again, because he's not a normal human. That's the only thing I could think of to explain the timeline issue, but I'm honestly not sure if the writers even thought about that. As much as I do like this one, I'm not going to pretend it's the most well-written movie in the world. Again, I do like it. It's a flawed movie, but I think it's easily the best of the Prophecy sequels. But that was my review on the Prophecy 3, The Ascent, and my next movie review will be on the Prophecy 4, Uprising.